Hi, this is Diana Millen Lacey in Kale, Hawaii, and I'm going to talk about the dissertation that I reviewed for the class, and it's entitled A Mixed Method Exploration of Unusual Spiritual and Religious Experiences of Women Immigrated from an Indian Culture to the United States. And the dissertation was written by Golrukh Adi Vakil as part of the requirement for her PhD in transpersonal psychology at Sophia, Sophia University. This study, which was written in 2012, Vakil sought to explore the phenomena she labeled spontaneous spirit possession, or SSP, and she identified this as commonly occurring in women, in contrast to what she called ritualized spirit possession, or RSP, which she stated is a male-dominant phenomenon in Indian culture. And by Indian culture, I mean from India, not Native American. So in discussing the contextual relevance of the study, Vakil noted that both spontaneous spirit possession and ritualized spirit possession are commonly found in many cultures, and they date back to antiquity. And for Vakil, this difference between the SSP, the spontaneous spirit possession, and the ritualized spiritual possession were integral to her study, what she wanted to look at. She took a historical approach in framing the issue of SSP, beginning with the Greek oracles in Delphi, and she noted the existence of a classic body of literature supporting the phenomena. Key features in relation to SSP are its dramatic manifestation, its sharp contrast to everyday reality, resulting in an altered state of reality, and induction of trance as a critical component of the phenomena. Drawing on her literature review, she defined spirit possession as involving one or more ancestral spirits who co-opt the body and mind of the woman of whom the spirit takes possession. And the result is an augmentation of the possessed individual who may adopt behaviors, vocal and speech patterns that mimic the spirit, and are in sharp contrast to the person's ordinary behavior. And an important aspect of spirit possession to Vakil is that women who are possessed don't remember anything tangible about the spirit possession. Once it's over with, it's like they never happened to them. So Vakil wrote that both SSP and RSP are common in Indian culture and in spiritual spiritual tradition. So as an immigrant to the United States from southern India, Vakil's understanding of the phenomena of spirit possession is based on first-hand knowledge and experience in addition to her research. Vakil asserted that spirit possession is a transpersonal phenomena by virtue of its exceptionality from everyday life experience, and she put particular influence on the trans-altered state that possessed women undergo. She also focused on the religious element of spirit possession, the fact that it does occur in many major religions, and she distinguished spirit possession within the Indian culture from a Western medical viewpoint, which tends to pathologize the event, and she wanted to focus on a culturally integrative perspective, articulating that it's viewed as a positive phenomena within Indian culture in terms of being a union or communion with the divine. She considered the focus of SSP to constitute a feminist study by the nature of the fact that women are the primary individuals who experience the phenomena. And she noted that owing to the nature of SSP, where women lose touch with daily reality, that it is a dramatic and embodied activity, and it changes the position of the woman in society from a subservient one to a more proactive position, since it's generally associated either with conflict resolution or with healing. And so it works to override the woman's position in traditional patriarchal society. Vakil also incorporated certain perceptions that she stated gave her study a feminist approach. And the first was normalizing rather than pathologizing the occurrence of spirit possession among her subjects. And so to do this, she formulated a specific culturally based question, namely, how do women immigrants from India cope in a new culture, specifically one that pathologizes the old phenomena of spirit possession. Based on the results of her literature review, she incorporated primary findings regarding SSP issues, one of which was women's oppression within a patriarchal system, and the second she took from her literature review was the healing nature of possession. And she considered that SSP often, at least in the Western literature, is associated with trauma and dissociation. But she approached the study with a positive perspective regarding the existence of spirits. And from this position, her interest ranged to an investigation of the power of a spirit and the empowerment the spirits imparted to the women they possessed, specifically in relationship to healing. She also drew on the work of Foucault, incorporating a social constructivist lens through which to view SSP. And through this lens, she defined SSP as a woman-created phenomena in contrast to RSP, which, as I mentioned, is male-dominant in the culture. And she observed that SSP as a female-dominated phenomena functions to shift the dynamics of gender inequality and power within a religious and social function. And she sought to maintain the agency of women by avoiding classification into westernized categories such as traumatized or schizophrenic. And her desire to avoid this dilemma was one of the reasons that she chose to utilize a mixed method study. She also felt that this would allow her to gather information from each woman based on the woman's individual perspective, and so the woman's voice would be heard, but she would also be able to do some validation or cross-validation of the data using the quantitative instruments. So she was interested in studying the phenomena of SSP among women immigrants who shared a common cultural background, and that was Indian sociocultural structure. And her sample was convenience-based. To qualify, her participants had to be at least 18 and female and living in the San Francisco Bay Area, and be immigrant from what she called an Indian culture country. However, I thought her definition of this was really broad because she included individuals not only from India but from Nepal, Tibet, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Fiji. And to recruit her subjects, she used a variety of methods. She emailed agencies and temples, churches. She sent letters to Indian newspapers, and she also did personal recruiting at temples. She attended a bhajan, spirit possession. It was a weekly meeting where she tried to recruit some participants from that, and she also approached people personally in public venues and through acquaintances and through snowballing, where she had subjects recruit other subjects. So I think the last three methods, the public venues and the snowballing and acquaintances, were what yielded 2/3 of her subjects. The other methods weren't as effective. And she did manage to get 30 participants, but unfortunately, in spite of her hypothesis that some of the women she recruited would have experienced the spontaneous spirit possession, only one study participant had a marginal experience with spirit possession, even though a number of these the women attended the regular spirit possession cult that she went to. So for methods, she used mixed methods. She had a qualitative component that consisted of open-ended narrative interviews where she attained demographic and experiential information on the participants. And then she also collected quantitative data on a variety of measures using 6 psychological tests. These were the dissociative experience scale, the perceived stress scale, the spiritual involvement and belief scale, the exceptional experience questionnaire, and sit down, Joy, and let's see, the post-traumatic stress disorder checklist and biopsychospiritual inventory. She collected qualitative data using iterative versions of open-ended questionnaires, and she utilized a modified grounded theory method credited to Glaser and Strauss. And she emphasized coterminal data collection and analysis and the use of evolving theory, which she attributed to Strauss and Corburn's methods. And the administration of the questionnaires followed an iterative format that she credited to Sharmaz. She self-transcribed the narratives the day after the interviews, and she used an independent peer coder to validate themes. So the quantitative tests were all previously, the quantitative instruments that she used were all previously tested for reliability and validity by their respective authors. However, that was in Western populations, so I view that as a concern. In terms of the analysis, she utilized selective coding to identify saturation of themes and for theoretical analysis following Strauss and Coburn, and she intuited themes using selective coding according to interpretive theory formation attributed to Sharmaz, and also descriptive statistics to present basic demographic information regarding the participants. The quantitative data analysis were performed by totaling the scores from the 6 psychological assessments to create continuous variables. She utilized SPSS to interpret correlations using Pearson product moment correlations, and she also used categorical and regression tree analysis, or CART, as an exploratory means of data partitioning and modeling, which is said to be suitable for data mining and exploratory studies with non-parametric data. She did use the services of a statistician in doing this, and her reasoning for using the CART was complexity and quantity of variables, small sample size constraints, and a lack of distribution theory for the data. So one of the most, talking about the findings, one of the most compelling aspects of Akil's study is that she identified only one participant who admitted to experiencing a spontaneous spirit possession. So as a consequence, she changed the focus of the study to analyze what she called unusual spiritual and religious experiences, which she called USRE. And 20 participants, 67%, reported USRE, which Akil used as a proxy for SSP. Her analysis identified 7 themes from the narratives, and from this she comprised a theory based on 3 phenomena: connection with the divine, ritual, and ambivalence. And she found that USRE was correlated with religion and correlating with religiosity, trauma, and spirituality, but that trauma was not a trigger for USRE. She interpreted this to mean that when experiencing trauma, women immigrants from Indian culture first turned to religion, and that USRE served a healing role. So she found some unexpected results, namely that less educated and less stressed women had less dissociation during these unusual spiritual and religious experiences, and that more educated women who exhibited greater ambivalence regarding their religious views exhibited higher social stress and weak or absent USREs. So the conclusion I drew was that this was an interesting and ambitious study that raises a number of methodological concerns. First, the fact that the sample is very much one of convenience and the number of participants is quite small, and that the recruitment was unsystematic. Also, the way she classified women of Indian culture, I think, is questionable, since they're not a homogeneous population in their background. Tibet, Nepal, Fiji, I think they were pretty varied. She also recognized that her perspective, being from the culture, could be a point of bias for the study, and that although she tried to control for this by using a blind peer coder, she acknowledged, and the incorporation of the CART triangulation, she acknowledged that her insider position could bias the data. I think the quantitative instruments were problematic that she used, since they were developed and designed for Western populations. She actually had to translate some of the, for some women whose English wasn't good enough to answer the questionnaires, and that raises additional questions. So I think Vakil readily acknowledged that this was a preliminary study, and she suggested that further research could be fruitful in the areas of developing a typology of unusual spiritual religious experiences, the impact of these experiences as coping and acculturation mechanisms, and the need to develop culturally appropriate psychological assessments. I think the study proposed an interesting research topic, but it was unable to explore it due to the lack of participants having experienced it. I thought the author conducted a very thorough and well-written literature review, but again, it wasn't really applicable to what she ultimately studied. So it seems she should have either redone the literature review or undertaken different recruitment methods to find appropriate subjects for her study. Data collection and analysis of the qualitative component of the study seemed to be well developed and purposeful. She didn't fully utilize grounded theory, but I think she did utilize it and formulated the because she had done a literature review, which you don't usually traditionally do in grounded theory, as I understand it, and you don't formulate hypotheses. She had done these things, but she did incorporate an iterative process and make changes based on changes that the data revealed to her. And the CART method, I think, was appropriate. I wasn't familiar with this, but review from Phelps and Merkel in 2008 indicated CART's appropriate for non-parametric and categorical data with a large number of variables and a small sample size, which fit what she was doing. And it's also geared toward prediction, which fits the exploratory nature of Vakil's study. So putting that aside, though, I think the utility of the quantitative data is questionable. She did develop some models, but I don't think she really got things that were different from what she deduced from her narrative data. So given the exploratory nature of the study, it might have been more effective to just use the narrative data as a pilot study and then correct the problems and reformulate the study with an appropriate sample size before attempting to do the quantitative analysis. But I think one of the things I learned from this is how things don't go as you plan, and how she wasn't daunted and effectively found ways to continue her study and get her dissertation done, which is also worth a great deal. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation.